Hello.
Hello, friends.
It's not spooky season anymore, but we're bringing you part 2 of Jack the Ripper. And also, it's the Wanderers of Weird podcast. It's always spooky season. But here is the probably not long awaited. Y'all were probably like moved on with your lives. Part 2 of Jack the Ripper. And it's getting late, so we're just going to get right on into it.
Hit it, Sally.
During the Autumn of Terror, hundreds of letters were sent to the local press and police stating they were written by the Whitechapel murderer. Many of them were deemed to be fakes written by either newspapermen wanting to start a story or people trying to incite even more terror. There are many quote-unquote ripperologists who believe that all of the letters were hoaxes, but others believe that some of the letters are genuine. The first one is the Dear Boss letter. The Central News Agency received this letter on September 27, 1888, and it was originally thought to just be another hoax. This was reconsidered 3 days later after the double murder of Stride and Eddowes. Particularly, the portion of the latter's earlobe had been cut from the body, which was an eerie promise made within the letter.
Is that a pun? Eerie earlobe?
Oh, no. I think we're getting into the part of the evening where Mara starts rubbing all over your backpack. She's hanging around over there.
Listen, ma'am, it's been a while. It's fine.
The police deemed the Dear Boss letter important enough to reproduce it in the newspapers and post bills of the time with the hopes that anyone would recognize the handwriting. This letter was also the first written reference that uses the name Jack the Ripper in reference to the Whitechapel murderer. Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about Leather Apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck, yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. P.S. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands. Curse it, no luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. Honestly, this one almost seems like it might be either someone who is off their rocker.
Right.
Or actually written by somebody who may have committed the crimes.
Received at the Central News Agency on October 1st, 1888, the handwriting is similar to that of the Dear Boss letter and makes direct reference to both the letter and the murders of the previous night. This is in regards to, I just went on into it instead of saying this is in regards to the Saucy Jackie postcard. It has been argued that the removal of Eddowes' earlobe and the fact that the card mentions the double event prior to it being described by the press testify to the postcard's authenticity. While others argue that the hoaxer could have obtained the details of both the previous letter and the murders in the early edition of the paper on October 1st.
Your ass down.
I was not codding dear old boss when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow. Double event, this time number 1 sequeled a bit. Couldn't finish straight off. Ha. Not the time to get ears for police. Thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper.
On October 16th, George Lusk, the president of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, received a tiny 3-inch square cardboard box in his mail. Inside the box was half of a human kidney preserved in wine, along with the From Hell letter. Medical reports that were done by Dr. Openshaw found that the kidney was similar to the one removed from Catherine Eddowes, though his findings were inconclusive. From Hell. Mr. Lusk, Sir, I send you half the kidney I took from one woman and preserved it for you to, the translation of these letters and the spelling of the time is a little bit different, so bear with us as we're reading these. But I preserved it for you together. Piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. Or no, I think that's supposed to be the other piece.
Yeah.
So the other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a while longer. Signed, Catch Me When You Can, Mr. Lusk. The next letter it doesn't have like an official name, but this letter was received by a local newspaper, and it is believed that it was intended for either Israel Schwartz or Joseph Lawton, both of whom provided witness statements to the police of the man that they saw. And there are very few researchers, though, who believe that this letter is authentic. And I think that most of like these subsequent letters the authenticity is a little bit questioned. You, though, thought yourself very clever, I reckon, when you informed the police. But you made a mistake if you thought I didn't see you. Now I know you know me, and I see your little game, and I mean to finish you and send your ears to your wife if you show this to the police or help them. If you do, I will finish you. It's no use you're trying to get out of my way, because I have you when you don't expect it, and I keep my word as you soon see and rip you up. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. P.S. You see, I know your address.
So this next one is an undated letter. The first one, Catherine Eddowes was found murdered near the Minories on September 30th. The first and second. That's the way that it was put.
Okay. I think it's instance.
Okay. The first and second instance that it references means the 1st and 2nd of October. Few researchers give this letter any credence. Beware, I shall be at work on the 1st and 2nd instance or inst in the Minories at 12 midnight, and I give the authorities a good chance, but there is never a policeman near when I'm at work. Yours, Jack the Ripper.
Undated letter number 2. Prince William Street was yards away from the main road between Augburth and the office of the Cotton Exchange, but few researchers also give this letter any credence. What fools the police are. I even give them the name of the street where I am living, Prince William Street.
Letter dated October 29th, 1888. This letter was sent to Dr. Openshaw, who had performed the medical exam on the portion of the kidney that was received by George Lusk with the From Hell letter. Yet another letter that many researchers don't lend much credence to.
And if you need to change so it makes sense, feel free. That's what I've kind of been doing.
Okay. Old boss, you was right. It was the left kidney. I was going to operate again close to you. Not
a clue.
Not a clue. Just as I was going to draw my knife along of her bloomin' throat, them cusses of coppers spoiled the game. But I guess I will be on the job soon and will send you another bit of innards. Jack the Ripper. Oh, have you seen the devil with his microscope and scalpel looking at a kidney with a slide cocked up?
Just based on like the verbiage that like we've seen, like how different it runs, I don't think that all these were written by the same person.
Right. And a lot of it's giving, which I realize sign of the times then as well, but a lot of it's giving like very uneducated.
Yes. Yeah.
It's phonetical spelling.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like the microscope.
Yeah.
A letter dated September 17th, 1888. This letter was discovered recently by Peter McClelland in a sealed report envelope in the British Public Record Office in 1988, and its authenticity has been greatly debated, and many believe it was a recent hoax placed in the records. It was first published in Paul Feldman's Jack the Ripper, the Final Chapter. Dear Boss, so now they say I am a yid. When will they learn, dear old boss? You and me know the truth, don't we? Lusk can look forever. He'll never find me, but I am right under his nose all the time. I watch them looking for me, and it gives me fits. Ha ha. I love my work, and I shan't stop until I get buckled. And even then, watch out for your old pal Jackie. Catch me if you can, Jack the Ripper. Sorry about the blood, still messy from the last one. What a pretty necklace I gave her. See, this one seems to be like it was written by the same person that wrote the Dear Boss letter. But if it was a hoax, they would have already known what the Dear Boss letter reads like.
On September 30th of 1888, PC Alfred Long found a bloodstained piece of an apron in the archway at Wentworth Model Dwellings on Goulston Street at around 2:55 a.m. Then he found a chalked message on the black brick. Say that word?
Fascia.
Okay. Fascia edging of the open doorway, which led to a staircase and a basement door. DC Daniel House arrived back at Goulston Street after 3 a.m. and PC Long returned at 5 a.m. The message was erased by 5:30 a.m. PC Long's original spelling used Jews, Jewes, with an E, but it was corrected to Juwes with a U on the scene by DC Halse. This correction was noted in PC Long's notebook as well as during the Eddowes inquest. PC Long's version, the Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing. DC Hall's version, the Jews are not the men that will be blamed for nothing. The city police accepted DC Hall's version, and the Metropolitan Police accepted PC Long's version, with each backing their own man. Because of the numerous discussions concerning the word and spelling, it was supposed to have meant, or what it was supposed to have meant, it is interesting to note that there are several different spelling of Jews found within the official records.
Will you get your nest made? All right. This is the last letter I included. There are, I think, more letters. And my source that I will have in the description has all of them. But these were the most just intriguing ones. But one of the many verses that were allegedly sent to the police, but it is likely that this was a hoax by Donald McCormick. And this was an undated third letter. And it has a little poem on it that says, 8 little whores with no hope of heaven. Gladstone may save 1, then there'll be 7. 7 little whores begging for a shilling. 1 stays in Heneage Court, then there's a killing. 6 little whores glad to be alive. 1 sidles up to Jack, then there were 5. 4 and whore rhyme all right. So do 3 and me. I'll set the town alight. Ere there are 2 little whores shivering with fright. Seek a cozy doorway in the middle of the night. Jack's knife flashes, then there's but one. And the last one's the ripest for Jack's idea of fun.
See, that had to be somebody different.
Yeah, it's well written. In terms of like the actual language, and it's
right.
There's a lot less red lines in the document. Yeah.
The number of suspects in the Jack the Ripper case runs well into the hundreds now, and while some are highly possible contenders, there are some that are just downright ridiculous. Every year, several books come out claiming that the authors have somehow managed to crack a case that no one else has ever been able to before. Some have admittedly managed to unearth some small bit of new information. However, it has only served to add yet another piece to an already massively large jigsaw puzzle. Overall, many of these twist the narrative to fit their particular theory, rather than looking at the theory and demonstrating how it stands up against what we know the facts about the case are. In the early days of the investigation, the police seemed to believe that the crimes were being carried out by a local gang, and their focus was on these so-called high-rip gangs. By early September of 1888, though, the police came to the conclusion that if the local gangs were responsible, the publicity and the panic generated would have led to someone informing on the others. By the time Annie Chapman was murdered on September 8th, the police determined that they were looking for one solo assassin and began devising ways of bringing him to justice. There was much speculation as to whether the killer demonstrated at least a minimal amount of medical and or anatomical knowledge, and to this end, the police began to look into the activities of several of the medical students that spent their time in asylums. This line of inquiry resulted in a dead end, however, as the movements of the students were all accounted for, and they were all ruled out of involvement of the crimes. Others disagreed that the killer demonstrated any sort of medical skills and theorized that his abilities were more along the lines of a butcher or a slaughterman. The police carried out extensive inquiries among the local butchers and slaughterhouses, and yet again met a dead end as all of the alibis checked out and eliminated all interviewed as suspects. A commonality throughout the investigation was that the police suspected that the killer lived in the district, and their inquiries and investigations focused primarily on the neighborhood where the crimes were occurring. Over 2,000 interviews were conducted by the Victorian police officers, and more than 300 people were actually investigated and 80 were detained. It is entirely possible that the actual killer was one of these people, and the investigations didn't yield anything concrete that would lead the police to pointing the finger at this person and definitively say that this person was Jack the Ripper. After the Jack the Ripper murders ended, suspect after suspect has been brought forth as being responsible for them. Prince Albert Edward Victor, Lewis Carroll, the Freemasons, and Dr. Bernardo are just a few of the more out there suspects. Others, such as Thomas Cutbush and Carl Feigenbaum, there we go, were also put forward at the time of the murders and were quickly discarded as suspects. But through modern research and their asylum records, their names have been brought back into the public eye.
The records regarding Thomas Cutbush were made public in November 2008 at the Reading Records Office. The files don't contain anything earth-shattering, but they do provide more insight into a man who was highly favored by the media as a suspect in the mid-1890s. Cutbush was named as Jack the Ripper in a series of articles published in The Sun in February of 1894. These articles went into great detail about the Whitechapel murderer, but didn't name Cutbush directly. Melville MacNaughton composed his memorandum as a result of the Sun articles, and for many years after, this formed the basis for Jack the Ripper research. In this memorandum, MacNaughton emphatically states that there are only 5 victims of the Whitechapel murderer. This statement resulted in our so-called canonical 5 victims: Mary Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly.
Hey, she's not going to knock over that hurricane lamp, is she?
No, I don't think so, but MacNaughton also provided a great amount of argument to support that the Sun articles were completely incorrect and that Thomas Cutbush was not, in fact, Jack the Ripper. and as a result, Cutbush was dismissed as a serious contender for the Whitechapel murderer. McNaughton mentioned the names of 3 other suspects that he said were more likely than Cutbush to have committed the crimes. This was M.J. Druitt, Michael Ostrog, and someone named Kosminski. Though he was completely wrong about many of the things he said about the 3, nonetheless, his musings brought more attention to these 3 men than had ever been paid to Thomas Cutbush. The Broadmoor Asylum files revealed some incorrect statements about Thomas Cutbush. Both the Sun article and McNaughton wrote that Cutbush had caught a venereal disease. The Sun wrote that he had caught it from a prostitute and that the resulting delusions were what led him to kill prostitutes. And McNaughton conceded that Cutbush had apparently contracted syphilis about 1888, and since at that time he led an idle and useless life. His brain seems to have become affected, and he believed that people were trying to poison him. However, Cutbush's admission documents and his asylum records make absolutely no mention of syphilis or any other venereal disease. The records of criminal lunatic number X32007, Thomas Cutbush, state that the cause of his insanity was hereditary in nature, and also mentioned that his aunt, Clara Hayne, stated the cause was overstudy. His records also indicate that he was not suicidal, but that he was a danger to others. Upon admission, his notes dated April 24th, 1891, state that Cutbush was a man of average height and slight build, expression vacant, eyeballs protruding, is restless and incoherent in conversation, stated that this morning that he had often been drunk, though not a drinker. Afterwards, that he had never been drunk through drink, as he had been a total abstainer for years. That the charges brought against him were absolutely false, and that he'd had no recollection of doing anything to cause such charges to be brought against him. He has more the appearance of an imbecile than any other kind of insane person. States that he feels sulfur rise into his throat from a cavity in the left lung, that he does not taste it or smell it or feel it, but know that it is so, and that in consequence he has tuberculosis.
Okay.
That he suffered from palpitation of the heart some time ago, but not lately. States he was at Peckham House Asylum, quote unquote, on a visit, for a few days after he was charged with his crime. He states that there is no insanity in his family, although he thinks both his mother and aunt are bad enough to want care in the way of being eccentric. Says he has often suffered from fits of uncontrollable temper. His tongue is tremulous. Complains of slight headache this morning, which he stated is unusual. And a report from May 20th, 1891 stated, struck another patient named Gilbert Cooper suddenly and without cause whilst in the gallery. He states that Cooper caught hold of him at the back of the neck with his fingers. This, the attendant in charge states, is quite untrue, as he, the attendant, was talking to Cooper at the time. Will not speak to me or explain the reason for doing so in any way. Stated at first that Cooper annoyed him. He is very dull, excitable, uncontrollable, and has the appearance of an imbecile. Future reports state that he appeared to be violent and very destructive, dull and apathetic, and notes of him becoming increasingly more and more, quote-unquote, demented. By July of 1896, he had developed cleaner in habits, but otherwise unchanged in his mental state, and his physical health was labeled as good. On August 1st, 1902, it was reported that Cutbush was very dirty and gives much trouble, constantly noisy at night, demented, and incoherent. And he died on July 15th, 1903. And there is no direct evidence to support that he could have been Jack the Ripper, other than he was in the night house.
Right. So the next person we're going to talk about is Walter Sickert.
Mm-hmm.
Crime novelist Patricia Cornwell wrote in her 2002 book of a portrait book, Portrait of a Killer, Jack the Ripper Case, closed, that Walter Sickert, or Sykert,
It's Sickert.
Is it Sickert?
Yeah.
Was the man who carried out the crimes that became known as the Jack the Ripper murders. Cornwell isn't the first author to point the finger at Sickert for his role in the killings, and others have said he at least knew who was responsible for the crimes. Budget was no issue when Cornwell set out to hunt down the killer to history's most famous unsolved crimes, and she set out to use modern forensic techniques with the Ripper case, something that very few had done before her. Her book caused a worldwide sensation, and the spotlight was pointed at Cornwell herself and on her suspect. She told a chat show that, "I do believe 100% that Walter Richard Sickert committed those serial crimes." Her theory discussed how Walter Sickert had been impotent following a series.
It's just impotent.
Oh, I read that too.
Yeah.
Had been impotent following a series of painful childhood operations for fistula of the penis, which I can only assume meant that he had urethra issues based on the definition of his affliction.
I looked it up. I didn't want pictures showing up or anything, so I just looked up a general definition of what that is. And it sounds like it was just like a urethra issue.
The impotency scarred him emotionally and left him with the pathological hatred of women, which over time allegedly led him to carry out the series of murders in the East End of London. Doubts have been raised about her theory when it was pointed out that St. Mark's Hospital, where the operations on young Sickert were supposed to have been performed, specialized in rectal as opposed to genital fistulas. This, however, doesn't mean that they weren't performed at all. It has also been suggested that Sickert was anything but impotent, and his first wife cited adultery in her divorce petition, and it is believed that he had several mistresses and fathered at least one illegitimate child. It would seem that the case for Sickert's impotence lacks substantial evidence to support its cause. There's also not a great deal of evidence to support his pathological hatred of women. Cornwell's book cites a series of Sickert's paintings that were inspired by the murders that were done in 1908 of a Camden Town prostitute named Emily Dimmock. Cornwell's hypothesis says that the series of paintings bears a striking resemblance to the post-mortem photographs of the victims of Jack the Ripper. It is not doubted that Sickert was fascinated by murder and in finding different ways to depict the menace of the crime and the criminal. I mean, isn't that why we are all gathered here today?
Exactly.
That said, citing his interest in true crime as an evidence for his being an actual murderer, specifically the murderer who carried out the Whitechapel murders, doesn't exactly have the ring of definitive proof to it.
You get your bubble out of my face.
It is important when looking at any murder suspect to be able to link the suspect to the crime. You would need to be able to place them at the scene of the crime or crimes. Again, the case against Sickert unravels further since there is evidence that suggests he may not have even been in England during the time of the Whitechapel murders. There were a number of relatives that refer to him being on holiday in France for a period of time that corresponds with many of the Ripper murders. It has been suggested that he traveled back to London to commit the crimes and then returned to France, but there is no evidence that suggests that there is any truth to this theory. Cornwell also determined that Sickert was responsible for writing many of the Ripper letters and used the statements made in those letters to strengthen her case against him. However, authorities on the case, including the police at the time, nearly all shared the opinion that none of the letters, even the Dear Boss letter that gave the killer a name, were the work of the actual killer. There's also the issue of the style of the letters varying greatly in terms of grammatical structure, spelling, and handwriting, which points to the fact that it is nearly impossible that one person wrote all of the letters. During the pursuit to prove Sickert's guilt, Cornwell funded DNA tests from numerous stamps and envelopes that she believed Sickert had licked and compared to the DNA that was found on the Ripper letters. There was a possible match to the stamp on the Dr. Openshaw letter. Critics of this theory have pointed out that the DNA comparisons focused on mitochondrial DNA, which is possibly shared by between 1% and 10% of the population and is not likely unique to Sickert. Another find was that the Dr. Openshaw letter, 2 Jack the Ripper letters, and 8 letters penned by Walter Sickert were all written on paper that contained the watermark of the Aberdeen paper manufacturer Alexander Pyrie and Sons. It has also been argued that this paper was widely available and that the Sickert letters were written between 1885 and 1887, and he may not have been using the same paper in 1888. He may well have been responsible for some of the Jack the Ripper letters, but since it is generally agreed that these letters were not written by the killer, it only makes him guilty of having written some hoax letters at most. Despite Cornwell's statement of the Jack the Ripper case being closed, it is anything but, as the claims that Sickert was also guilty of the Whitechapel murders is far from definitively proven.
Yeah.
Sometimes I
think
things.
that's like it's very telling of like what we said earlier, that authors of these books will very much twist the story to fit the narrative that they want to accomplish.
I mean, that's the case with literally anything.
Oh yeah. But I mean, it's wild to see it like broken down of like how the facts were twisted to fit the narrative.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. In 1992, former Liverpool scrap metal merchant Michael Barrett produced a journal that he claimed had been given to him by his friend Tony Devereaux in a pub the previous year. The author doesn't actually identify himself by name, but based on personal references and other information contained therein, that the diarist is meant to be the Liverpool cotton merchant James Maybrick. Maybrick died in May of 1899, and shortly after, his wife Florence was arrested and charged with murdering him via arsenic poisoning. Within the diary, the author claims that he had seen his wife, whom he refers to as, quote, the bitch or the whore, throughout the diary with an unnamed lover in the Whitechapel district of Liverpool. The rage that filled him from that experience sent him on a murderous rampage through the Whitechapel district of London, where he mutilated and killed 5 prostitutes. The journal contains long-winded descriptions of the murders, ending with the assertion, I give my name that all know of me, so history do tell what love can do to a gentleman born. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. There had been no previous inclinations that James Maybrick could have been Jack the Ripper, and the only evidence that supports the idea that he is the diarist that was supposed to have been his confession. His viability as a suspect in the murders boils down to whether or not he actually wrote the diary, and if he did, does what he wrote correspond with the known facts? The provenance of the diary has been a massive dividing issue among ripperologists, making the path to proving innocence or guilt in the matter of James Maybrick a truly viable suspect for the Whitechapel murders has been anything but straightforward. Initial reactions to the diary were encouraging. Several of them agreed that, even if not a true confession, it was most certainly of the period that could have been written by James Maybrick. It was very evident, however, that more forensic analysis was needed to establish the diary's exact date of origin, and it was here that the scientific data began to become blurred and contradictory. Additionally, when it came to the authenticity of the diary, Michael Barrett informed the Liverpool Post that he had in fact forged the diary, but then withdrew this confession. Additionally, his wife, from whom he had been separated, said that the diary had been in her family since the Second World War. But what about the actual details of the crimes contained within those pages? Did they demonstrate that the author had firsthand knowledge of the crimes that would have only been known by the perpetrator? And in a word, no. Close scrutiny of the diary shows that many of the descriptions of the crimes and the scenes of the crimes were just taken from press reports of the time, and later accounts of the murders, in fact, replicate some of the more common inaccuracies and errors. For example, in regards to the murder of Mary Kelly, the author gloats that he placed her body parts around the room and other dastardly deeds that he did with her body parts. Despite accounts saying that her body parts were, quote, hung around the walls like Christmas decorations, this was definitely not the case. It was an astonishingly horrific scene, there is no doubt, but not quite that bad. All of the parts of Miss Kelly were primarily confined to her bed and the immediate vicinity, like just right on the floor, that kind of stuff. And the diarist claimed that he had laid her breasts on the table, however, they were actually located beneath her body. This is just one plain example of how the writer of the diary used common misconceptions and outright fallacies to paint the scene of the crimes, which suggests that the writer did not, in fact, have any first-hand knowledge of the crimes. And there is one other piece of memorabilia that would link Maybrick to the Whitechapel murders. In 1993, Albert Johnson, this is just a year after this diary has been located, Albert Johnson purchased an antique gold watch. On the inside, the initials of the 5 victims were scratched, along with the signature of J. Maybrick and the words, "I am Jack." As with the diary, the scientific analysis of the scratches were found to be compatible with the period from 1888 to 1889, but these findings have also been disputed. The sudden appearance of the watch just after the, quote, discovery of the diary raised a great deal of public suspicion. And the only way that these two pieces would connect James Maybrick to the Jack the Ripper crimes would be to definitively prove that both pieces are genuine, and so far, this has not been satisfactorily done.
It often appears as though the only piece of evidence needed to point the finger at a suspect in the Ripper case was that they lived in the area at the time of the crimes, which would reduce the suspect pool from a small figure of about 67,000 people. In order to be an actual viable suspect, though, the person would have to be placed in the area at the time of the crime, and, ideally, you would be able to place them at the scene, which is the point where many cases against the suspects begin to crumble. This seems to be a similar case with a man known as Charles Allen Lechmere or Charles Cross. Born Charles Allen Lechmere in the parish of St. Anne's, Soho, in 1849 to John Allen and Marie Louisa Lechmere. Following the death of her husband, his mother remarried to police constable Thomas Cross. Although he continued to use his name Lechmere, when he gave his report to police when he found the body of Mary Ann Nichols, he gave his name as Charles Cross. Charles was a local carman. Basically, he would work as a driver, a porter, or in removals. He was on his way to work around 3:40 a.m. on August 31st of 1888 and passed along Bucks Row and had the misfortune of stumbling across the body of Mary Nichols, who has been widely accepted as the first victim of the Whitechapel murderer. At least, this is the story that he told police and restated at the inquest into the death of Mary Nichols. It has been widely accepted that by generally everyone, including the coroner, inquest jury, police, newspapers, etc., that his statements were true. This was until 2012, when several newspapers printed articles claiming that Charles was far from the innocent bystander that he claimed to be, and that he was, in fact, the person who murdered Mary Nichols. Again, the primary goal when looking at a suspect is placing them at the scene of the crime at the time of the murders beyond a shadow of a doubt. In this respect, Charles Cross fits the bill. Not only can he be placed at the area at the time, he was also walking toward the exact location of where the murder occurred at almost the exact same time it was being carried out. This alone should move him straight to the top of the list of suspects. The Daily News reported his testimony at the inquest of Mary Nichols' death. Charles A. Cross, carman, said he had been in the employment of Messrs. Pickford and Co. for some years. On Friday morning, he left home at about 3:30 to go to work, and passing through Bucks Row, he saw on the opposite side of something lying across the gateway. Or he saw on the opposite side something lying across or against a gateway. In the dark, he could not tell at first what it was. It looked like a tarpaulin sheet, But walking to the middle of the road, he saw it was a figure of a woman. At the same time, he heard a man about 40 yards away coming up Bucks Row in the direction witness had himself come. He stepped back and waited for the newcomer, who started on one side as if he feared that the witness meant to knock him down. The witness said, "Come and look over here, there's a woman." They both went across to the body, and the witness took hold of the hands while the other man stopped over her head to look at her. The hands were cold and limp, and the witness said, "I believe she's dead." Then he touched her face, which felt warm. The other man placed his hand on her heart, saying, "I think she's breathing, but it's very little if she is." He suggested that they should shift her, meaning, in the witness's opinion, that they should seat her upright. The witness replied, I'm not going to touch her." The woman's legs were uncovered. Her bonnet was off, but close to her head. The witness did not notice that her throat was cut, as the night was very dark. He and the other man left the deceased in the Baker's Row. They saw the police constable Misen, whom they told that a woman was lying in Bucks Row. The witness added, "She looks to me either dead or drunk," and the other man remarked, "I think she's dead." The policeman answered, "All right." The other man left witness soon afterwards. He appeared to be a carman, but the witness had never seen him before. The coroner states, "Did you see Police Constable Neal in Bucks Row?" The witness says, "No, sir. I saw no one after leaving home except the man that overtook me, the constable in Baker's Row, and the deceased. There was nobody in Bucks Row when we left." The coroner said, "Did the other man tell you who he was?" The witness said, "No, sir. He merely said that he would have fetched a policeman, but he was behind time. I was behind time myself." It has always been presumed that Robert Paul, the second person to arrive on the scene of Mary Nichols' murder, arrived there shortly after Charles Cross found her body. According to those that favor Cross as a viable suspect, Paul may have actually interrupted Cross in the act of killing Mary, and rather than standing looking at the body, Cross was attempting to cover up some of the wounds that he allegedly inflicted. The theory states that when he heard Robert Paul approaching, Cross had to think quick, and rather than flee and potentially draw suspicion to himself, he chose instead to remain in feigned shock. Robert Paul recalled in a report in the Evening Standard in its September 3rd, 1888 edition, "It was exactly 3:45 when I passed up Bucks Row to my work as a carman for Covent
Garden Market."
I'm so tired that I can't read. "It was dark and I was hurrying along when I saw a man standing where the woman was. He came a little towards me, but as I knew the dangerous character of the locality, I tried to give him a wide berth. Few people like to come up and down here without being on their guard, for there are such terrible gangs about. There have been many knocked down and robbed at that spot. The man, however, came towards me and said, come and look at this woman. I went and found the woman lying on her back. I laid hold of her wrist and found that she was dead and the hands cold. It was too dark to see the blood about her. I thought she had been outraged and had died in the struggle. I was obliged to be punctual at my work, so I went on and told the other man I would send the first policeman I saw. I saw one in Church Row, just at the top of Bucks Row, who was going round calling people up. And I told him that what I had seen, asked him to come." I'm like AIing over here. Whoops. Anyway. I told him what I had seen and I asked him to come, but he did not say whether he would come or not. He continued calling the people up, which I thought was a great shame, after I had told him the woman was dead. The woman was so cold that she must have been dead some time, and either she had been lying there left to die, or she must have been murdered somewhere else and carried there. If she had been lying there long enough to get so cold as she was when I saw her, it shows that no policeman on the beat had been down there for a long time. If a policeman had been there, he must have seen her. He must have seen, it says here, for she was plain enough to see. Her bonnet was lying about 2 feet from her head. Those who favor Cross as the suspect argue that Robert Paul's account differed from the one given by Cross. Cross stated that he had been walking along the opposite side of Bucks Row when he observed something lying in the gateway, and he had only gone as far as the middle of the road when he saw that what was lying in the gateway was in fact the figure of a woman. He stated that he was still standing there when he heard Paul approach. But according to Paul, Cross was actually standing where the woman was. It could have been Cross that had just murdered Mary Nichols when Robert Paul came along Bucks Road and interrupted the gruesome deed. Is there other evidence to suggest that Cross was a serious contender for the perpetrator of the Whitechapel murders? Not really, sadly. One of the primary points of suspicion is that he gave the police a fake name, which he upheld when he testified at the inquest. The theory goes that the only reason he would have given a false name was if he had something to hide. However, if the motivation was to keep the police off his trail, he seemed to have failed in the fact that he did provide them with his accurate address and place of appointment. He also did still show up to the inquest to testify, which suggests that either he was a smooth and ruthless operator or that he provided the false name for some other reason, one that can simply be guessed but not verified. Cross was a local man, which many experts believe was essential for the killer to be able to commit these crimes. He only lived a few streets away at 22 Doveton Street, Bethnal Green, and worked as a carman for Pickford's and Broad Street, 30 minutes or so west of Bucks Row. When he found the body of Mary Nichols, he was on his way to work, which was a journey that would have taken him around 40 minutes on foot and through the streets that were to become the epicenter of the killing ground for the Whitechapel murder. The Daily Telegraph and other news outlets reported on August 31st of 2012, all the subsequent murders took place between his home in Doveton Street, in Bethnal Green, and place of work in Broad Street at times when he would have been walking to work. This must be enough to place him at the scene of the crimes in question, right? Except that Berner Street, where the murder of Elizabeth Stride took place, isn't on a logical trajectory from Doveton Street to Broad Street, unless you remove Elizabeth Stride as a Ripper victim, which some researchers do. Some argue that his mother lived on Cable Street to the south of Berner Street and that he theoretically could have murdered Elizabeth Stride on his way to or from a visit with his mother. Interestingly enough, there are suggestions that the branch of Pickford's that he worked at dealt in the delivery of meat, and therefore if he had any actual bloodstains on his hands or clothing, that this could have helped him explain that away. There was also a later recollection of Police Constable Misen, who stated that Cross lied to him by suggesting that there was already a policeman at the scene of the murder at Bucks Row. Newspaper quoted Misen as telling the inquest that a carman whom he had identified as Cross told him, "You are wanted in Bucks Row by a policeman. A woman is lying there." It is a mystery as to why Cross would have claimed that there was already a policeman on scene if that were definitely not the case, if it even happened. Several other newspapers quoted Misen's testimony as the exact words from Cross to him being, "You're wanted down there," with him pointing to Bucks Row. It's entirely possible that Cross did not mention the other policeman, but had simply informed Misen that he was needed in Bucks Row, where a murder had been committed, and upon arriving, Misen found Police Constable Neal already present and may have believed with hindsight that Cross meant that he was wanted by another officer. It's almost impossible to decipher the nuance of the language used here due to the passage of more than 130 years, and it is lost to history whether Cross lied or whether it was simply a statement reported differently by each newspaper. Another possibility that has been theorized is that Cross did lie in order to cover the callousness that both he and Paul had demonstrated by leaving the woman lying in the gateway due to their both being late for work. The bottom line is that the one and only crime scene that Cross can definitively, without a shadow of a doubt, be placed at is the one of Mary Nichols. His presence at all other scenes is purely conjecture and falls into the what if, could have been, might have been, could have done, might have done school of thought ripperology. What Charles Cross Litchmore, or was Charles Cross Litchmore the real Jack the Ripper? With a vast pool of suspects, the honest answer is might have been, but based on the facts of the case, there is no way to say with 100% certainty whether he was or wasn't. That was a lot.
Yeah, that was a long one. That's why I took a couple of those shorter. This is about where I start to like wrap it up, because I was like, okay, that one was a long one, and I'm starting to get bored. Melville McNaughton said that Michael Ostrog was a Russian doctor and a convict who was subsequently detained in a lunatic asylum as a homicidal maniac. This man's antecedents were of the worst possible type, and his whereabouts at the time of the murders could never be ascertained. Along with other names on the extensive suspect list, Ostrog seems to be a likely contender, but yet again, McNaughton seems to not really know a whole lot about another of his suspects. Ostrog was a petty thief and con artist who spent several long periods of his adulthood incarcerated. The only recorded act of violence on his record was when he was arrested in 1873 by the police superintendent Thomas Oswald, on whom he pulled a revolver at the police station. A newspaper described Ostrog as having a clever head, a good education, and polished manners, and said that he would be certain to succeed in life, in almost any honest life to which he might devote himself, but who, nevertheless, is an inveterate criminal. Ostrog was released from a harsh prison sentence of 10 years for stealing what amounted to about 5 pounds on August 28, 1883. He was back to his old tricks by 1887 and stole a metal tankard from the Royal Military Academy at Woolwich and was arrested and committed for trial at the Central Criminal Court. During his trial, he showed signs of insanity, and though several officers and doctors said he was shamming it, he was certified insane and transferred to the Surrey Pauper Lunatic Asylum in Tooting, which his occupation was registered as a Jewish surgeon. He was discharged on March 10th, 1888, and according to police, to whom he had to report to as a condition of his release, he disappeared without a trace. At the height of the Ripper Scare, when the general consensus was that police detectives were looking for a lunatic with medical knowledge, they began to search asylum releases that might have coincided with the start of the murders. This avenue of investigation may well have brought Ostrog's name into the investigation, which encouraged McNaughton to include him on the list of suspects. Ostrog's failure to report to the police certainly led to his name and description being published in the Police Gazette on October 26, 1888. His description concluded with the warning statement that special attention is called to this dangerous man. Another appeal in the Gazette led to Ostrog being apprehended on April 17, 1891. Since he was certified insane, he was sent to Banstead Lunatic Asylum, where it was reported that he was suicidal but not a danger to others. Melville McNaughton asked the medical officer at Banstead to inform the police if Ostrog was discharged, which happened in 1893. He promptly returned to his life of thievery, which resulted in several more prison stints. His last recorded release from prison was on September 17, 1904, and after that, he totally disappears from records. There is nothing in his very long criminal career that would suggest that Ostrog was a violent homicidal maniac, and there were never any records where he had attacked women. It is most likely that his failure to report to the police after his asylum release in March of 1888 was due to him trying to find luck in France, where he was arrested under one of his numerous aliases. He was held in custody from July 26, 1888 until November 18, 1888, when he was brought to trial. and he was given a 2-year prison sentence and was held in the lunatic wing of a French prison until his release in November of 1890. This alone rules him out for any involvement in the Ripper murders, as this was the time period when the murders were being carried out.
A more talked about Ripper suspect recently is Dr. Francis Tumblety, who was suggested by Inspector Littlechild. Prior to and during the Whitechapel murders, Chief Inspector John Littlechild was the head of the Metropolitan Police's Special Irish Branch, a position he held from 1883 to 1893. He had little to do with the actual investigation, but as a high-ranking police official, he certainly would have had contact with Dr. Robert Anderson and Chief Inspector Swanson. In 1913, journalist George Sims wrote to John Littlechild asking if he had any knowledge of a Dr. D being suspected of committing the Whitechapel murders. Sims was apparently referring to Montague John Druitt, whose name had been circulating through police for the previous 15 or so years. Littlechild wrote back saying that he had never heard of a Dr. D being mentioned as a suspect, but then went on to suggest a suspect that had not been previously mentioned in England. He wrote, "Amongst the suspects, and to my mind a very likely one, was a Dr. T, who was an American quack named Tumblety." He went on to say that Tumblety had been arrested for some unnatural offenses and had been released on bail and subsequently fled to another country with no other mention of him ever again. It was believed he committed suicide, but certain it is that from that time the Ripper murders came to an end. Dr. Francis Tumblety was arrested and charged with the acts of gross indecency with several males on November 7th, 1888, and as Littlechild noted, he was released on bail and fled the country. Littleton's assertion that he vanished and probably committed suicide is inaccurate because Tumblety was definitely heard from again. He eventually sailed for New York, and on landing, the American press were hot on his trail in relation to his possible connection with the Whitechapel murders. As soon as he arrived in New York, the NYPD took an interest in him, and Tumblety was kept under surveillance by Inspector Burns of the police department. Journalists would question the inspector regarding Tumblety being sent back to London to be questioned about the Ripper murders, and Burns responded that there is no proof of his complicity in the Whitechapel murders, and the crime for which he was under bond in London was not extraditable. It was noted that Burns laughed at the suggestion that Tumblety might be connected to the Ripper's crimes. The claim that is often made to back up his possible involvement is that he was known to collect medical specimens, including uteri. This is very little evidence to suggest that he actually ever did, though. The allegation came from Colonel C.S. Dunham, who said he was a guest at a dinner party where he witnessed Tumblety fiercely denounce all women, but especially fallen women. He went on to say that Tumblety had taken all of the guests to his office and showed them a dozen or more jars containing the uteri of every class of woman. Dunham's credibility is somewhat questionable, though, and he himself was known as a confidence trickster. He only made his claims after there were press allegations that linked Tumblety to the Whitechapel murders. The probability of the story being true is slim, but the probability of it being made up in order to get paid for an interview to cash in on Tumblety's sudden notoriety is high. People who knew Tumblety suggested that they believed he was a killer. One woman who thought he wasn't at all capable of the crimes was his New York landlady, Miss McNamara, who was quoted in the New York Herald as saying, "Dr. Tumblety is a perfect gentleman. He wouldn't hurt anybody." Like many of our other suspects, the case for Tumblety's involvement is quite weak, and there is no concrete evidence that suggests that he was ever violent or if he could have been the perpetrator of the Ripper murders. Furthermore, the Metropolitan Police never even considered him a viable suspect. If they had considered him for the crimes, he would not have been released on bail for the lesser crime. There is a laundry list of suspects that I could truly go on However, I fear that the audience doesn't want to hear any more, barely their evidence against people who most likely didn't carry out the crimes. It will most likely remain one of the greatest unsolved murder mysteries of modern history. People for years have put in a plethora of work to unearth the criminal, and people will continue to do so. It may be in vain, but it might be worth the try for them. For the one who definitively solves the Whitechapel murders will, without a doubt, be a fixture of history. That sort of notoriety would have any ripperologist salivating. Other suspects include Leather Apron, Montague, why is that so hard for me? Montague, John Druitt, Aaron Kaminsky, George Chapman, Frederick Deeming, Louis Dimeschutz, or is that?
Yeah, that's how I would say it.
Miss Percy, and Niall Cream.
Jack the Ripper in popular culture. There are countless books, movies, shows, graphic novels, and art that depict varying versions of Jack the Ripper murders, but these are just a few of the more well-known. Not only are there likely thousands of books written on the subject of Jack the Ripper, he has also graced works of fiction, including Sherlock Holmes tales, the 1913 novel The Lodger by Marie Bellic-Lowndes that tells of a landlady that suspects her tenant is a murderer. The Lodger was also adapted into a silent film in 1927, which has been widely held to be one of the finest products of British cinema and has had a long-standing influence on film in Britain during that time, which also helped to establish Alfred Hitchcock's reputation for tense thrillers. A film simply titled Jack the Ripper came out in 1959, presenting a fictionalized version of the story. Murder by Decree from 1979 inserts Sherlock Holmes into the Ripper mystery. My personal favorite, the 2001 film From Hell, was based on the graphic novel of the same name, which starred Johnny Depp and Heather Graham. It is a very heavily dramatized version of the story that leans heavily into the secret societies and conspiracies within the British ruling class. Ripper Street ran for 5 seasons from 2012 to 2016 and was set in the months and years immediately after the crimes and uses the social and political situation in Whitechapel as the background for finding the murderer. DC Comics Batman Gotham by Gaslight is a reimagining of the killer in an alternate Victorian-era Gotham City with Batman investigating the murderers. It almost seems a little silly, doesn't it?
Right.
Running from 1989 to 1996, the previously mentioned From Hell graphic novel series provided readers with a detailed and chilling interpretation of the murders and weaved in the conspiracy and occult themes throughout, which is why it made it more enticing to create as a feature film.
Let me just say that this is why I don't like DC, because Marvel would never.
No, they probably would. They did like Spider-Man Noir and stuff, so it's a similar vibe, and it was probably done at around the same time, if I had to guess, because it was probably like 90s comic book. It was like a big thing where they would like harken back to old times. Video games have also been a major part of the Ripper universe, with games such as Assassin's Creed Syndicate taking players to a Victorian-era London, and an entire Jack the Ripper expansion pack, which is a wild statement,
right,
placed players in a storyline where they must track down the killer. Sherlock Holmes vs. Jack the Ripper is another example of a merge of fiction with reality, where Victorian London's most famous fictional detective is pitted against London's most famous unsolved crimes. The Order 1886 introduced more supernatural elements to the story and portrays the murders as being part of a broader historical and mythical conspiracy.
Hell yeah, I think I could probably get behind that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, that does sound kind of good. The mystery of Jack the Ripper's identity, the gruesome nature of his crimes, and the dark allure of the Victorian-era London as the backdrop gives the opportunity for endless interpretations and reimaginings. As long as the case remains unsolved and human nature to be somewhat curious about true crime remains untouched, Jack the Ripper will remain a fixture of our imaginations. It is important to remember that though we don't know who Jack the Ripper was, his victims were very real people. Though they may have lived their lives according to their social status at the time, we cannot forget that these were very real women who were very much actually brutalized, and their stories have been sensationalized for over 130 years. But we must also not forget that their names could have been completely lost to history had some stranger in the dark not snuffed out their lights. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly deserve to be recognized as humans who were just trying to get by.
I like it.
So.
Well, on the note of true crime things, not to spread any kind of false information.
Oh, no. Are we spreading false information?
Maybe not. I don't know. I will play both sides of it here.
Yeah.
But like TJ was telling me not too long ago, so he's been going back and forth to Houston for work. So apparently going on right now, there's been multiple bodies found. Okay. But like in the bayous. Okay. Yeah. Now Houston police chief is saying that he's citing homelessness, substance abuse, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
However, and this harkens back to other episodes because I'm almost positive we've discussed this. Former detective is saying that some of these deaths may be linked to alleged smiley face killer. And I'm pretty sure we've talked about it.
Yeah, we definitely talked about the smiley face killer.
But what a time to be alive.
Yeah, I know.
And like TJ's been there. I'm like, brother, keep your head on a swivel.
Yeah.
But like it's horrifying.
Oh yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But how this is gonna sound so bad. Don't
How thrilling that your husband like get murdered.
How fucking cool that like this is a thing. Not that. I mean, you see what I'm trying to say?
Yes, like, because like in 2025, serial killers don't really exist,
right? And then
like they did, which I like. They talked about this.
It's a lot harder to get by with shit
exactly.
these days.
But they also talked about this. Like, there's a theory, and they talked about it on last podcast on the left a long time ago. So there's a theory that like the reason why we saw like an uptick of like serial killers like in the late 60s moving into the 70s and early 80s is because of lead poisoning in the water. So like because of the amount of lead that was in the water at the time, it like affected more brains than like it does now. Cause like I'm pretty sure that there's still lead in our water, but it's more of a minuscule amount than it was because it wasn't really regulated. So there's like a theory that it caused like brain damage basically. And that is why there was like, you know, there would be these quote unquote, he was a good guy. But he's got bodies in the crawl space.
But let's just be real about it too. Like drugs were a huge factor back then, and it was more
that too.
It was more glamorized back then than it is like now. Like, we're like cracking down on that shit more and more.
More of those, the like most of the more notorious serial killers though weren't on drugs. Like Jeffrey Dahmer was an alcoholic, and that was because he did kind of a little bit like that was the only way he
little bit of a conscience.
Like that was the only way he could commit the crimes. Like he could carry them out.
Yeah,
was to be like just wasted. But like I think in terms of him, I think like in terms of like a Jeffrey Dahmer, it's like a nature versus nurture.
Yeah,
because like His childhood was not great.
Girl, we just watched, I think we're down to like the last 2 episodes of the Edward Gein thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that one has also been, they talked about that on last podcast. I guess that's also kind of highly inaccurate.
Well, I'm going to say, if any of the, like, his upbringing in this is true, it's fucked.
Yeah. Because if I'm not mistaken, it's been a long time since I've listened to their series on Ed Gein, but if I'm not mistaken, he's the one with the mom who was, like, inappropriate at times.
Well, she, according to this, was like, his dad was a drunk and would, like, come home just shit.
Yeah.
And the mom finally was like, get out. We're done. Get out. Never darken my doorstep again.
Mm-hmm.
She told Edward that he was to never, she didn't want him to be with a woman.
Right.
That the only time she allowed his dad to touch her was to have kids. That's the only reason why a man should lay with a woman is for procreation.
Yeah.
You know, they're to put forth children.
Right.
But she at one point told him, you don't ever touch a woman.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a woman. Women are the devil. They're all Jezebels.
Right.
All of them. The one girl that he was interested in, she called her Pandora.
Yeah. I don't remember which one of the serial killers it is, but one of them, their mother, it was a male, when he was a baby, would like pinch his little wee-wee.
It never, unless I missed it, it didn't, because I was like, it was on while I was working and I was trying to.
I feel like it was an Ed Gein.
It could
feel like
be,
it was him.
but I don't remember it being mentioned in this, which I mean, again, it's a Netflix situation.
Right.
And two, there's a lot of like back and forth as far as timelines go in this show, because it's like telling his story, but it's also telling how it like inspired filmmakers such as why is his name escaping me? I see him. Psycho
Hitchcock.
Yes, it inspired Hitchcock. It you know, it goes on to like shows like the filming of like Buffalo Bill. Like at one point, it's literally the scene where he's dancing. He's like, "Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me." You know, the whole situation.
Right.
It's like, it's interesting. It's so messed up. And honestly, like as a person who tried to watch the Jeffrey Dahmer stuff and couldn't stomach it, when TJ said, let's watch this, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stomach this.
It was pretty bad.
But like I said, we're on the last 2 episodes. And it's
pretty gross.
It is. It's interesting.
Because I think he also inspired, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it does kind of dip into that, too.
I think he only ever actually killed one person.
Yes. According to this, he only ever killed...
was, like...
Well, like, and what gets me, and it could come out into the, like, the last little bit, he keeps saying, I don't remember, I don't think I killed one person.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever killing one person. I didn't kill one person. And I've got a feeling that he's going to come out and be like, mother did it because, like, mom took him over. You know, because the one person that it shows that he killed, spoiler alert, he had her in the barn and had mother in the barn with them. Yeah. And, like, he put a hammer in mother's hand and made mother hit her over the head.
Oh, okay. It's very psycho.
Yeah. So... I've got a feeling that that's where that's leading, but like I said, we've got an episode and a half, 2 episodes left.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but it's so,
it's I mean, it's crazy to think about like how different some of those like serial killers would have turned out if they had like nurturing.
Yeah.
Like better nurturing.
It really makes you think about, you know, if you've got kids.
Yeah. And I mean,
what
it
you're
makes
raising.
you really consider like the long-standing argument of nature versus nurture.
Right.
Is it something? And I personally believe it can be both. It can be both. Both two things can be true at the same time. It can be some people are just born off, and it can also be life circumstances have created monsters.
Right.
So,
and I do believe that you can nurture too much.
yes.
You can, absolutely. Because I mean, if there's
That's
like
gotta be Willow.
if there's like an unnatural type of connection between you and your child, then that could also lead to issues. But
like, you know, those weird boy moms, but we won't get into that.
listen,
I don't want to alienate any of our audience.
Listen,
it's
as
weird.
a mom who has a boy and was so excited to have a boy because she'd finally have a kid that loves her.
Well, I'm talking.
He's not. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
The emotional incest boy moms.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But like my kid,
the ones who are like, no woman will ever be good enough for my baby boy.
Absolutely not.
And the ones who wear white to their son's weddings.
Oh my God.
Like those.
No. My boy, he loves me and he tells me I think sometimes
that's good.
He loves me.
I feel like that's healthy.
He's not a boy. He's not a mama's boy.
Yeah.
Even a little bit. I get days here and there to where all he wants to do is cuddle up with me. Like today and yesterday. A lot here lately. He's really been like, I love you, Mom. And like out of nowhere. And he just wants to cuddle. Like today, Gemma was trying to cuddle me and he like manhandled her off of me so that he could cuddle me. It was a whole like smackdown in my living room to see who got to cuddle with Mom.
Right in your lap, probably.
Yeah. No, well, more specifically on my back because I rolled over I was laying on the couch and I rolled over to my stomach and they were laying on top of me wrestling. It was not fantastic. But safe to say my son is not one of those.
Right.
Mom tries. I will absolutely like hold him down and try and kiss him all over his face and tell him that he's Mommy's baby while he's, get off of me, stop. And I'm laughing the whole time because I know it's aggravating him.
Right.
But he's also laughing the whole time. So,
but it's just the emotional incest that ain't it.
Can't.
It ain't it, bro.
I will say I do love those like POV like skits that people do like on TikTok and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's one person that does stuff like that on TikTok where it's more along the lines of like people trying to tell you how to parent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yes, girl. Get them. Anyway. All right, guys. Our quote unquote nonprofit of the month. Give some people some food.
Yeah.
Give somebody some food. Donate to your local food cabinet, food pantry, shelters,
food banks,
whatever. Cook somebody a meal. You see somebody on the street, stop at a McDonald's and give them, a couple cheeseburgers. Just help somebody this month.
Yeah.
Okay? Put some food in somebody's belly. That's all we ask. Okay?
Yep.
And you can tell them if they so happen to be bored that they could listen to our podcast and follow us on Facebook,
Instagram,
TikTok,
YouTube.
And if while they're listening, they think, what would be really cool for them to talk about on this podcast is this particular subject. You can tell them that they can email us at wanderersofweird@gmail.com. And with that being said, okay, bye!
Bye!